We don't want somebody halfway across the world that doesn't know what's going on at the local level to dictate what we can and can't ingest into our body autonomy. It just frankly just goes down to body autonomy. If we have body autonomy, it would solve all of these political debates that's going on between these two parties that are just corrupt anyway, and they no longer reflect for the people. So yeah, it's a reset, reboot, starting over, and then trying to rebuild these new institutions, right? I think that all these technologies, and I consider psychedelics to be a technology as well, right? It's primal technology. People,
It's like
humans,
nature's technology.
yeah, natural technology. Yep,
Mhm.
yep.
Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for coming by for another episode of the Ben Wehrman podcast. I really appreciate you joining me today. And we have a wonderful new guest that's going to take a very different angle on the Bitcoin side of things, as we love to do here, just explore all these different types of characters that find ways to apply Bitcoin to these different situations and ideologies. So we have DECRIMNAT'S, short for Decriminalize Nature, also known as Laura. Laura, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Ben, for inviting me on your show. I'm really excited to get into some of the overlaps between Bitcoin and the psychedelic world. There's been, over the last couple of years, we've been in the Bitcoin Twitter space, X now, been exploring the intersect of decentralized movements. They're both decentralized movements. And yeah, just a change in how systemically we, go and produce value to the world with Bitcoin, and psychedelics really explores your inner world to explore value systems inside of you. So, yeah, over the couple years, we've just been talking on these amazing podcast, Spacecast places. So, thank you so much for inviting me onto your show. I'm really excited to get in depth there.
Absolutely. Yes. And we had one previous mushroom themed episode with Brandon Quinham, who I'm sure you're aware of. He's done amazing work. You've heard of Brandon, right?
Yes, yeah. In fact, yeah, Brandon Quinham's article, the Bitcoin is the mycelium of money, was why I actually moved over to the Bitcoin Twitter space a few years ago. I come from Decriminalized Nature was a decentralized movement to get psychedelics decriminalized for possession. So I was an activist over the last 5, 6 years, really as more like a journalist more than anything, just on social media, reporting on various municipalities and cities that have decriminalized psychedelic plant medicines and fungal medicines. And really, I was just using media to report on various states now decriminalizing and putting up a framework for legal psychedelic therapy. So I come from the decriminalized side. That's where my DECRIMNAT name sort of was shortened down to. But yeah, like if you don't have, like, psychedelics is used quite a bit for mental health therapy, and so if you don't really have financial health, you really can't have mental health. I mean, it's a huge component of, how you interface with the world. Money is. And so really in 2020, when the COVID and the money printing hit, I put the decriminalized nature. I didn't really put it aside. I just incorporated the two and moved over to Bitcoin Twitter X, and just, talk about psychedelics and psilocybin within Bitcoin Twitter X. And I just found like mutual followers now that have been exploring this like intersection of, sovereign medicine and sovereign mind. So yeah, that was when Psilocybin Citadel was created. I actually, the name's created on another podcast. I went on my first podcast like 3 years ago, and then, yeah, we started to put together an online DAO, I guess, a decentralized organization, to brand Psilocybin Citadel as an advocacy group. Psilocybin Citadel was kind of an advocacy group, and to educate mostly on, safe and responsible use of psychedelic medicines, in a sovereign matter, and then also educate about Bitcoin being a monetary new financial system on the internet. So yeah, I've been sort of chronicling my journey through the rabbit hole of Bitcoin over the last. I got involved in Bitcoin about 10 years ago, and I've been in psychedelics probably about 20 years underground. But yeah, over the last 5 years, we've just been just speaking out about how psychedelics have helped us overcome PTSD or trauma, or just get back in touch with nature or yourself or with your friends and family and community. So Psilocybin Citadel was a project for the last 3 to 4 years, online mostly. But now we're really rebranding it to Citadel, which is really building on Bitcoin now. Like, I feel like Bitcoin is going to continue to grow from here. We just positioned a flag there, and we're now in 2025 really starting to get back into community, and then really exploring and teaching about why we need Bitcoin to help continue to create arts and music and human experiences, especially in this age of AI coming on board too. Is what we consider jobs or value that we provide to the world is going to dramatically change with these new technologies. So we have, I'm in my 50s. I'm Gen X. I know your last podcast, you interviewed Gen Z. They're amazing generation. That's a very creative generation that's coming on board. Getting some of these young people working, and then building, and then just building some community places that we can start to have arts, music, and various Bitcoin circular economy. Really, that's really the goal, is to try to move into an experiential learning place, so that, like, most of us, I think that our scouts or early adopters will go in and go deep down to the rabbit hole, but most people don't have the time to do it. So if we can invite them into a weekend festival experience where you're just trading maybe some things and tipping the DJ and sats and so on. So that's the move that we're trying to move into this year. So we're starting to really build that community, and having people get the Bitcoin adoption too, to start utilizing this as savings, and then utilizing it to purchase and pay people too for their work that they do.
Amazing intro. Thank you. Yeah, that's great info to kind of get us started here. That's so many cool projects and ways for people to think about this stuff. And I'd like to really just dig into this idea of decriminalizing nature, because I think that's such a great focus to hang your hat on, because we see this happening everywhere, where nature, like all the beautiful things nature's given us, are being pushed through all this bureaucracy to basically block these wonderful healing powers of the world. And what is your overall take on where things are right now? You could either talk about psychedelics or just generally like nature's medicine, in terms of what is the government overreach looking like nationally or internationally that's stopping people from finding these healing powers?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Yeah, there's really, within the psychedelic debate going on, there's the decriminalization movement, which is kind of a grassroots upwards, like from the upwards up movement, saying we do not want possession of these natural substances to be a criminal activity, and we should not fear arrest or prosecution or jail time for ignoring natural medicines in with ourselves, right? So that's the decriminalization movement that's moving up, from the municipal to the state level. But the legal framework really is what the government oversight is. And at the state level now, both Colorado and Oregon have different, they're slightly different models, but like in Oregon was the first state that both decriminalized and then put up and are trying to create a legal framework for psychedelic therapy training and so forth, for facilitators to provide medicine to the people. But because all the facilitators need training and oversight, and there's the bureaucratic arm that creeps in, right? So the cost of those therapies is thousands of dollars in Oregon. So for like a three weekend session or 3 day weekend, you'd pay anywhere from a couple $1,000s to anywhere from $10,000. And there are other countries like Jamaica, Portugal, Mexico that have legal psychedelic uh, retreats already available, and those are also thousands of dollars, and you got to fly there, etc., right? So in order to have a simple mushroom that I can grow, or nature grows, you can go and pick if you're you can identify, nature provides these like sacraments for free. And the venture capital mind farm, I'm call it mind pharma, wants to take the profit motive of these natural medicines that like civilizations have used for thousands of years. So there is a big fight back from the decriminalization side and then the legal side that wants to create this framework, government framework. So like there's an analogy that I used in a tweet years ago saying it's almost the difference between decriminalization and legalization is almost like the difference between Bitcoin and CBDCs. So, Bitcoin is that, nobody controls the actual Bitcoin, it's open source, right? You can run a node for free. And then you can also run, mining for like to secure the network. Nobody is, there's no authority figure that's saying you shall do this or not, right? Whereas CBDC would be controlled by, central bank digital currencies, which, our central banking systems would adopt a ledger system, whereas the ledger system with Bitcoin is a public open source globally, available with anybody that has access to the internet. So that's the similar analogy that's going on in the psychedelic world is that we want to be able to grow, gather, gift, and create a economy, just in terms of, just natural free market supply and demand, right? And then, but also, I've also capitulated a little bit that we do need, because psychedelic substances do put people into a vulnerable state. We want to, definitely have some kind of safety regulations. There have been, cases of abuse as well. So like, to have their, facilitators and people that like sit for you that can, that can actually, help to, overcome some of these vulnerable states, right? So there needs to be some safety guidelines from, the regulatory body, whatever level it's at, whether it's a city, state, or federal level, right? There probably needs to be some safety regulations, but we want to also, not have it, become a economic tiered access issue. So the people who can afford to go to these retreats and fly to, like, Peru has a ayahuasca sort of retreat industry already. So if you can afford to go halfway across the world, you can go work with a shaman to break your ego down and renew yourself. But your common people, your plebs, right? The everyday people that are working 3 jobs, or a mom that's got 3 kids that can't afford to even have somebody to sit their kids, let alone have somebody oversee you. We want to have access to these medicines as well to be able to do this safely at home with, friends or your, loved ones. So the decriminalized nature movement is trying to make sure that we have access to these medicines without the state saying that the legal framework would be the only allowed, therapy for psychedelic natural substances. And decriminalized nature is saying, no, we want to be able to protect settings such as music festivals or, a natural cabin setting where you can facilitate within community, healing within community. And then the most powerful part, I think, especially with the fiat world, the fiat system over the last 50 years have created the matrix, right? And when, like, I was a career woman before I quit my job to take care of my mom. So that is a complete identity change that happens between a corporate cog and, a nurse 24/7, right? So I use psychedelics to, break that down in order to change my position in life. And, I learned how to grow on the internet, by myself, because I couldn't go to these music festivals or wherever there, that I used to get access to, like, mushrooms. So it forced me to kind of go deeper in my psychedelic journey to, like, really connect with how mushrooms are grown. And then, yeah, one day Bitcoin was like a thing on the side. It was just a travel fund for me. I loved to travel back when I could. So I was like, okay, this will be a travel fund. And then, yeah, over the last 10 years, I just had to learn about the financial system, the central banking financial system, the fiat system, in order to deconstruct how all these problematic issues that are happening in society, the base, when you get down to it, the base layer is really, a lot of it is the financial system that's corrupted now, right? So yeah, I just focused that it's a psychedelic journey, and the decriminalization movement really brought me to Bitcoin, and then now we're just trying to figure out, okay, position ourselves to be like, all right, if this, and I think that within the West Coast, I just made a trip down California too. I think the West Coast, and in Nevada, like all these states, all are having psychedelic bills introduced. So I think within the next probably 4 to 8 years, a couple election cycles, we'll start to see, like, New Mexico just got a legal framework for psilocybin therapy just this week. So I think we're going to start seeing, just like the Bitcoin bills are being introduced at the state level now for states to hold their, Bitcoin strategic reserve, and having some kind of a framework for Bitcoin, right? I think psychedelics too, at the state level, we're going to start seeing different frameworks competing to see what framework is going to really work. And then hopefully, I mean, I don't know at the federal level. I mean, I'm just hoping that it'll be descheduled somehow so that, we can start to use these medicines, right, without fear of, I mean, it's a scheduled substance. It's a felony if you get caught with it, shipping over state borders or something like that, right? So yeah, the psychedelic world and the Bitcoin world were underground subcultures, but I think now, especially this year, I feel like it's just now starting to become main culture, mainstream adoption, especially, and I think that a lot of that has to do with this decentralized media that's happening, right, with podcast platforms. So we can speak. You allow us to speak what the movement's about, and be able to change consciousness out there. So I think all of that has to do with the decentralized media that's happening. And then, moving into Nostr platforms, right? So I'll take a pause right there, but yeah, how much media, especially podcasting 2.0 with Fountain, you can stream sats, and then once the TikTok generation figures out that you can tip people on Satoshis on Nostr platform, it's over. It's over. So,
Yeah, I have Nostr circled in big letters on my notes here. We're
yeah.
definitely going to get there soon. And one of the quick questions I had before we dive into a couple of those things, one of the things that you just touched on that I want to make sure I'm clear on before we move forward is the difference between decriminalization and legalization. What's like the quick one sentence answer for the difference between those two to make sure I'm clear?
Yeah. Decriminalization is really the permissionless side of things, right? So you don't have to ask permission from the state to go grow your own mushrooms or pick your mushrooms, or it's permissionless natural substances. Whereas the legal framework is if you start to build a business around it or license therapy, the state will create guidelines, basically like licensing. It's licensed therapy. So the state will have to create some kind of an oversight board that says this type of therapy is allowed. Whereas if you want to just enjoy music with mushrooms or go on a beach to enjoy a sunset, that's not therapeutic according to the state, right? So it's really a weird gray zone right now, and the states are trying to figure that out. So the decriminalization movement was like, no, let's just like Bitcoin, like leave us alone. We can self-regulate and put in the safety precautions ourselves. And Colorado is really leading that effort. Colorado has a really great model, and there's already some ranches that are popping up that have medical intakers, like real doctors that have retired that do medical screening for older patients, right? You want to make sure that there's no psychosis that happens and so on. So there is a medical intake form, and then this particular ranch, I saw their forum at the Telluride Mushroom Festival, and they specifically cater to people that have had trauma in their workplaces, like first responders, policemen, veterans, nurses. Basically trauma that happened in a really stressful forest. They create a group therapy. So the price point actually comes down too, because a one-on-one therapy is going to be more expensive than an 8-person group, right? So the price point is coming down in Colorado. And that's the kind of community model. And they also, part of psychedelic integration, if you really want to change your life, like say you want to overcome addiction, you really need the support group. It's just like AA. You need that integral support group that that really understands your trauma. And so I think that building those community integration is really important for people to, have that community to rely on after a psychedelic trip. So yeah, that's the decriminalization model. They're already forming those kind of models, and that's the type of community model that, like, the Citadel is trying to form, is so that we can have, growers that, that can supply us, like safe mushrooms, especially with like street drugs being really like scary these days. Like I haven't been in the, like the rave scene in like 20 years or something, but like just recently going out, just it's scary with fentanyl crisis and like, going out to the streets, right? So we want to be able to make sure that we have safe, supply, and also to understand the potency level, because some of these new hybrids, it's not 90s mushroom. There are hybrid man-made mushrooms now that are very potent. So in order to understand drug math and drug dose, we need to have some sort of quality control testing to be able to form that. So really what we're saying, I think the decriminalization model is, the free market, whereas, the legalized model is being formed for, the right reasons. We want to have safe and, responsible use of psychedelics, but you have like the powers that be that control the money, like venture capital or these, mind pharma people or governments, right? Creating
People that just
bureaucracy.
happen to make a lot of money when we say sick and stupid, basically.
Right, yeah.
The
So
last people you want regulating anything.
exactly. So that's been sort of the fight in the psychedelic world. It's really the same fight as Bitcoin versus as CBDCs. I think it's the same thing. Just like we want to be able to do what we want to do without authoritative figures telling us that thou shalt do, synthesize, psilocybin, holding a therapist's arm in a clinic or whatever. Whereas sometimes you want to just go listen to music on a beach and cry or whatever, right? Like that's therapeutic. So why are we being regulated to be able to commune naturally with nature or yourself or community? So that's really the decriminalization protection that we're trying to make sure we have some say in the regulatory framework that's going to start to form in 2 to 4 years, right? Just like the cannabis went through it, I don't know, a dozen years ago. Now half the country has some kind of cannabis legal framework that's, you have to sell it at a dispensary, for example, right? So yeah, so I think mushrooms are probably going to go through the same sort of and underground, there are already, like both in California and Washington. Like, you just go to a farmer's market and ask your gourmet mushroom growers. They're going to know a source of mushrooms, right? Or, like dispensaries are gearing up, I think, for a supply chain once that legal framework drops. So, yeah, I think we're in that gray zone 2 to 4 years before a legal framework forms. And yeah, we're just gearing up. I think the Citadel wants to create the spaces, really just the network. It really is the network of people, just like the social layer on Bitcoin, really, right? Is all these people that have amazing projects that they're working on Bitcoin. And sharing with the community. We want to be able to offer real life gathering spaces and maybe some kind of like a lounge at some of these Bitcoin larger meetups, right? So that we have a place. The plebs have a place to socialize and build on this new Bitcoin network. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I can give one of the examples of what we should be aiming for right now. I'm actually in Costa Rica. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but it's
no.
legal here. You can get it anywhere. And I just grabbed, like, I forgot that I even had this in the little drawer underneath me, but this is the one I picked up. Sweet Magic Golden Teacher.
Yeah, yeah.
They literally, there's just a little at the local market. There's just a guy posted up there with the table and all this stuff, and he'll like talk to you about what the different types are that he has,
Oh,
and people just get to buy what they want,
yeah.
like human beings.
Yeah,
They get to
absolutely.
make their own choices, and they're adults. Like the having a nanny state government is just going to cause all sorts of issues, and like we sort of mentioned there, it's just how much of a joke is it that the people who I've talked over this on my podcast many times. One of my favorite episodes I've done was with Matthew Leshak, basically walking through the connections between the government, the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, all these giant regulatory bodies who all are incentivized to make people addicted to crap and sick and keep them in a lower state of consciousness, because that helps every single one of them simultaneously. So these are not the people we want regulating any of this stuff. And I think that I'm really glad you just cleared up the decriminalization versus legal side, because it sounds to me like decriminalization, that's why it's your name. That is what we really want to go for here. The legal framework, you're basically still working within the system of fiat, and you're letting them make the rules, which is not what we want to do. And a question I guess to ask is, so I grew up around the Seattle area in Washington, and I remember I was just going through college right as all these things were starting to become decriminalized legalized. I'm just going to mess up those words. I need to stop myself now. Legalized. And have there been any cases in the U.S. of full decriminalization of any drugs that we can look at as an example, or have they only done these legalizations where it's really still controlled within the fiat world?
Yeah, yeah. I'm also located in Seattle, so yeah,
I didn't know
Seattle.
that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Okay,
I'm I'm
cool.
just north of Seattle. Yeah, in Washington
Awesome.
State.
I'm from Whidbey Island. Are you
Okay,
close by?
sweet. Yeah. We're very just on the other side. I'm just near
Amazing.
Everett. So
So we've been
yeah.
through a similar story,
Uh
but
huh.
you were paying more attention than I was when I was a teenager.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the age difference too, right? So I'm Gen X. I'm in my early 50s now, and yeah, I mean, same. I mean, the Pacific Northwest has always had this hippie mushroom vibe, right? And then I went through the cannabis. I mean, the Evergreen State was the first to, legalize cannabis, right? And so we have a legal framework. And actually, just a quick story. The reason why cannabis got legalized is because um, Costco actually sued the state for private alcohol sales, and then won. So the state lost revenue in terms of the liquor sales. So they needed another revenue stream, and so cannabis became the avenue to get state funds, right, from taxation. And I remember when I wasn't a big activist in the cannabis marijuana legalization, but I had friends that were. And so I remember them being really mad about this huge taxation for their medicine, right? So you can still get a pharmaceutical card, and and get a medical grade and so on. So, but there's every state has these different rules, right? Like every state has different rules for the cannabis industry. So yeah, moving on to the mushroom world, like it's it is coming. The Seattle took the decriminalization, so the city itself decriminalized in 2020, and then as well as Oregon, the state of Oregon, and so they and I think they screwed up because what they did was they decriminalized everything. Like they decriminalized all drugs, including the harder drugs. And so now they're rescinding some of it because the streets are a mess with the fentanyl crisis and these other drugs. So like the state wants to lump all of these medicines into one bucket and be like, this is legal and these are criminal drugs. Psilocybin and all these drugs are different molecules. They're different medicine remedies for different problems, right? So that's why the state coming in to regulate it becomes chaotic, because the rules are always shifting because of the bureaucracy. They're always a few years late, right? Whereas a free market, if you let the free market decide what's working and what's not, people that abuse the system will be called out by the community, and then bad dealers will go away, right? I want to bring out Silk Road. I mean, Ross Ulbright was just released from 10 years in prison because he had Silk Road, which utilized black market Bitcoin, right? And now he's going to be speaking, I think, this year at the Bitcoin conference. So times change. I think that my point is that, like, we've seen over the last 20 years marijuana being an illegal substance to the fourth largest agricultural industry in Washington state. So and then it was during COVID, it was an essential business. The dispensaries, because it's medical, right? Like it stayed open, so I think the point is when consciousness, like through these, when we talk and tell stories, right? Like humans tell stories, that's what we've done, most of our lives. And then these decriminalization movements were just people, everyday people, going to council members and telling stories about their, work with psychedelic medicine. So having these podcasts, spaces where we can talk about, the legal framework and, what the front is in the psychedelic realm, is really important for people to understand, where we're reporting on it, and we're just telling people what we're seeing, out here. And yeah, I really do think that the psychedelic, at least at the cultural front, on the cultural level, just like you're seeing mushrooms pop up in Costa Rica, right? And I wanted to go to the Freedom Festival down there because they do have retreats already. Freedom Festival is this Bitcoin Freedom Festival that I was invited to, and I wanted to go down to, see the decriminalized mushroom, economy down in Costa Rica. But also this couple weekends ago, I went to the local mall. I hadn't been to a mall in forever. But there's a legal CBD stores that's carrying some mushroom vapes now. So like drug technology has like advanced forward. We're like 2025. It's the future now, right? So yeah, I think yeah, the mushroom culture and products are being prepped in for some kind of a legal framework in the next couple of years. And then each state will have, slightly different regulations, and it'll be annoying just like the cannabis is. But yeah, I mean, it'll become more and more available to the plebs, which is really the goal, because Bitcoiners have studied how money works, right? When I put that lens onto the psychedelic movement, it's like we're trying to figure out why the cost of therapy is so expensive in the United States, because the money is broken, right? If you need to hire people, minimum wage is $20 an hour now, right? It was $4 an hour when I was in college. So why is it like the hour I worked 30 years ago worth 20% of what an hour's worth of work is today, right? So that's what I'm teaching these kids, the Gen X kids that we're, within our community, right? And when they change an oil, like in my car, like I'll pay them in Bitcoin, like I'm trying to teach them peer to peer, money that doesn't get degraded when they're 50 and, have, kids that are coming in, and when I don't know, minimum wage is going to be what, $400 an hour now? Who knows? Like it might be in a couple of years. Like we just don't want to be dependent as a community on Jerome Powell deciding what the supply and interest rate of money is in the broader public is going to be. So that's the education level that we're trying to bring in as well, to teach young people it's not the world that's messed up, it's not you that's messed up, it's the money that's messed up. So
Yeah, I definitely focus in on like you're not crazy. It's not your problem. There's something very real going on under the surface that's making it extremely difficult for everybody, especially young people and folks who are trying to solve things the way that human beings normally should. But things are so just screwed up right now because of fiat money. And this is why Bitcoin is so powerful. And it just comes down to just removing all of the bureaucracy that we talked about and just making money peer to peer again, with no dark forces behind the scenes inflating your money away and stealing your value from you so they can go just lob trillions of bombs over seas to the Middle East. That's basically how the money system works right now. We need to get rid of that, get back to a system where people just can interact with each other and transact with each other and communicate with each other on places like Nostr and buy things with Bitcoin. It's that simple, and it's so simple, but it changes everything when you think about the ramifications of that. So super interesting. Very, very good to know that. And one of the things that we kind of grazed over, I usually start with this, but I think I'd love to go back to this, was just your story. How did psychedelics even come into your life? You talked a little bit about how you used them while you were taking care of your mom. And how did shrooms even join your life, and how did it become part of your story?
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was introduced to psychedelics in my 30s, really, kind of late in life. I was pretty much no drugs, no alcohol, pretty square in my 20s, just going up the corporate ladder, doing the thing you're told: buy a buy a car, go to college, buy a car, get married, buy a house, and so forth. And then, yeah, my life fell apart in my 30s. Like, so yeah, I was introduced to Burning Man school. And so I went out to Burning Man a couple years in my 30s and was introduced to mushrooms, and where I really changed my identity, really. I mean, it helped me recreate myself as a new person, really. And then, late in the about 15 years ago, I had in a short period of time, I had quite a bit of like family and friends that died very suddenly. So I was dealing with death experiences. My father had died. One of my boyfriends actually passed away too. So within like a couple of years, I had to really, face, that life is, the mortality of life. And mushrooms really helps you sort of deconstruct that. And have, spiritual journeys, really, to help me guide through those death experiences. And I was actually experiencing a lot of high anxiety because of those deaths. And I did do traditional therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy. And then I also went to group meditations at a Thai Buddhist monastery. And those practices really did help me to reel in some anxious thoughts about death. But really just doing mushrooms out in the playa by myself. And I had done mushrooms in groups and listened to music, and it was a festival setting, but I'd never really done mushrooms by myself to really connect with myself. So I did for a few years, and really helped me overcome some of these traumatic death experiences, and move on and move forward. And then and exactly. And then I got into caregiving with my mom. I was, working at an aerospace firm, Boeing, and I had to quit to take care of mom because I couldn't afford it. Like literally, like if you want to hire a nurse here in the Northwest, it's like $8,000 to $10,000 a month. It's like my whole paycheck would just be going to take, I would just be going to work to get money for somebody else to take care of my mom. So I just cut the tie and said, all right, I'm going to, take care of my mom, at home, and did it to the end of her life. But I couldn't have done it without Bitcoin, because otherwise I thought my caregiving journey with my mom was going to be like 6 months to a year, because she was hospitalized and I didn't think she had much left. But when I took care of her at home quietly, she lived 8 years, right? So, if I didn't have Bitcoin to hold on to my savings, right, especially through a 40% increase in property values that happened while I was quietly taking care of mom at home, my savings, the purchasing power of my savings that I'm trying to live off of, was taken away. It was stolen. So I got angry. I mean, and then I had to deal with that anger and channel that anger to something much more useful, right? So that's why I went on Bitcoin Twitter and talk about some of this stuff. Like, if your money can't hold value through your whole life, you're never going to be able to retire. So I think that boomers, and I also studied, I think Brandon Quittem probably talked about the fourth turning, right? The generational cycle theory. And that's how I see the lens to the view, especially American culture, right? Or Western culture in general. That every, 80 years you have this disturbance in the force that disrupts society dramatically, like the last one was World War II. So that, when you go into those kind of shadow work of understanding history and, how the American empire really enforces its power throughout the world, right? And then you see this digital power, an old industrial power turning into this digital power. And I think that we are in this disruptive time frame where, the old, centralized institutions like government, central governments, education, medicine, even centralized medicine, right? Um, that is an institution that reflects the old centralized power of industry. Whereas now we have a decentralized digital global network, right? So that's a very disruptive way of how society is constructed. So I think that's the type of discussions that I would love to have, is like, through this disruptive time, what kind of, how does, like, food distribution or medicine distribution change when we are globally connected in a network environment with native currency Bitcoin on that layer, right? So that's the kind of interesting discussions. I think that these conference settings are great, but I want to be able to talk about these kind of like issues within community, because that's where it really matters, right? Like, so those are the kind of discussions that I would love to bring into the social layer within our community. So I'm talking to some of the leaders within the community that have places so that we can pop up, whether it's a digital broadcasting type of medium like podcasting, or a festival where everyone gets together and then we make breakfast and then we sell breakfast for $10 or whatever, equivalent of sats. So people utilize Bitcoin and get an experiential learning, right? Because some people are learn by like reading or listening to podcasts, but other people, we all learn things differently. So some people, they're going to get it just as the first transaction, they're going to be like, oh, this is just digital cash, right? It's not that hard. And most people don't really care what's happening behind behind the scenes. I don't know how email works. Did you? I've used it for 30 years. Like, I don't really care how email works. It is the ST or whatever, the SMP or whatever, it sends the signal, the code, accepts it on the other end. My message is broadcast. Like, I don't care how it works. 99% of the people don't care how the money works. They just want to be able to buy their goods and services and pay their bills. So how do we get that main adoption and teach people how to actually utilize Bitcoin. I think that's this epoch that we're in now. But we have to build real world spaces. We can't be stuck in, the digital world if we want to really have, more plebs, utilize this technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with all that. I think it's so important to be using the tools that we have available here. And we talked a little bit about how Bitcoin just gives people the ability to transact without being attached to the fiat rails, where you can just do it peer to peer as money should be. And I'm curious how you would also tie just eliminating the money printer or obsoleting the money printer, the fiat money printer, as we talk about, with Bitcoin. How is that an organic way to disarm this giant system that's causing all of these problems in the first place? Because I know that we talk a lot about how the government has so much power, and the central banking cabal has so much power because they have the ability to print infinite money. So could you add a little bit of color to that? How Bitcoin really is a perfect solution to the Death Star and like removing the root problem that caused all these issues?
Yeah, God, that's a big picture level psychedelic thinking type of cap that I need to put on.
That's what
But
we like
because
here. That's what
I
we
know,
do.
I love it too. And that's, I mean, I think Bitcoiners have all faced that reality. Like, holy crap. Like, you know, it wasn't like I tell this story. I was like, I didn't, I was in Bitcoin 10 years ago, but I didn't understand the fiat system. It was until I understood how central banks work, and how money flows in the fiat system, that I was like, wow, we're $34 trillion in debt. Who owns that? You start questioning things, right? And then you're just like, crap, like this house of cards is going to fall, right? So that's when you freak out and you're like, crap, I gotta move over to Bitcoin network, because if there's a monetary reset, right, that's going to happen globally, that's going to be very like an unstable system. But I had this other podcast that I was on, and this was actually through a psychedelic trip. I'm trained as an engineer, so my real orange pill moment was the John Vallis show, when Michael Saylor was on that show. And Michael Saylor really explained Bitcoin and this big technology disruptive system, like a systems network, right? Because he used the engineering sort of mindset to explain Bitcoin as a system. So I was able to deconstruct that Bitcoin as a system and learn about that. And so once you do that, and then in a psychedelic trip, actually, I was thinking about the intelligent design of Bitcoin. So there's a couple things that's, specifically with Bitcoin, right, is Satoshi mined Bitcoin, and the 1 million that he has held back, right? It hasn't been moved yet, but who was Satoshi, right? You go through the origin story, and it's so unbelievable. This anonymous entity or whatever it is dropped this code on the internet and pieced out in a couple years once it got going, right? But also there's intelligent design, like every 4 years is the halving, which coincides with the American election cycle. So I feel like that was coded to maybe have every 4 years you have the supply going down, so the monetary value, or it gets harder and harder to actually mine Bitcoin and then actually get Bitcoin, right? So maybe it was some kind of a controlled demolition of the fiat system, where they knew that essentially the central banks, are printing debt, and the United States is not going to be able to pay back $34 trillion, right? Period. They don't intend to. They never will, right? So when the people who own the debt realizes that the U.S. treasuries are no longer considered money, then that whole entire system fizzles, right? So I think that the intelligent design of Bitcoin with the 4 year cycle, the halving cycle, really does coincide before the U.S. election cycle, right? We just had one last spring, I think, was the last halving. So, and then in the fall, you had the American elections happen, right? And then you had candidates that were, including Trump, that made it to the Bitcoin conference, right, in the summertime. So I think that particular 4-year halving cycle that coincides with the American election makes me feel like there's some kind of an intelligent design built in that says that it's going to be some kind of a controlled demolition of the fiat system, right? Whether that was one person, whether that was some kind of like, I don't know, NSA agent, white hat, gray hat, who knows? Or maybe it's AI. Like now that we have AI coming on down, I mean, maybe Satoshi was AI. Governments usually have technology in advance before they drop it onto the public, right? DARPA created the internet, and then 20 years later, I have internet at my university, right? So possibly the technology, who knows? The mystery just makes it so much more fun. It's a good story. It's a great story. Like Bitcoin has a great story of, you know, grassroots movement that is trying to like overthrow the giant, right? So yeah, I think that's partially why I've been involved in the movement. And yeah, hopefully that we can, we have the power to create what we need in our lives and community at the citadel level, instead of government saying this money shall be allocated to wars or certain things that you don't disagree with, right? You have the individual power to really create the world you want to, the legacy that you want to leave behind at my age, right? And then the younger generation, they don't have anything to lose. You guys are just building it from now on, right? So going back to that fourth turning cycle, Gen X really is that spring generation where it is the renewal process, right? And I don't want to say like I'm located in the United States, but Bitcoin is global, right? As well as the internet. So this is the first time that we're globally connected like this, and you and I can talk on video from Costa Rica up and down the Pacific coast, right? So big picture thinking, I think, is really needed today. And yeah, I'm really happy that it's going on in these podcast spaces, but I also think we are in a bubble. And when I do force myself to go, like I just went down to California to do a 3-week tour, right, in a van that I bought on Bitcoin. That was amazing. Like, on I'm writing about it for Stack Chain magazine right now. And like the culture is amazing too. Like, just that we have, places that we can, tell our stories out there. So yeah, I think that the culture of Bitcoin is, it's a subculture that's turning into main culture, as psychedelics. I think we're no longer underground anymore. Like major people are talking about how, psychedelics have helped them therapeutically. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Lots of good, hopeful stuff for the future. There are some big questions. And one of the things you talked about was AI. And that's something I haven't done a whole lot of episodes really purely focused on that. But it is obviously something that's becoming more and more ubiquitous and more crazy and terrifying in some ways when you see just these types of videos, is just one example, that are now being made that look completely real, where just the whole idea of trust is going to go through a huge change and evolution here in the next few years, I think, this decade for sure, where, no one's going to know what's real anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious to hear just I'm sure you think about this all the time, having an engineering mind and also just understand where technology is going with Bitcoin and psychedelics. It's all just this huge chaotic umbrella of things that are all sort of coming together. What are your thoughts on the pessimistic path and the optimistic path, and how these tools we've talked about, psychedelics, Bitcoin, and Nostr, how do those help us make sure we get in a more positive direction and actually be able to use these new technologies as a way to uplift humanity rather than suppress it into a dystopian hellscape?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm really meditating on that right now too. Not within myself, but actually discussing it with the community, the arts and music community. Because yeah, AI is now competing like graphic arts, like it can, yeah, I can create a logo in 30 seconds, right? I don't need to hire that kid down the street that can do the drawing, right? Like, so value, like what people consider as value is being, some of these jobs are going to be taken by AI. But I always use the example of secretary banks. Like, 50 years ago, even my dad was a secretary for the Navy. He used a typewriter. That was his skill set, right? And people, offices had secretary banks to communicate messages. So you had to pay secretaries. Now we don't. We have our own personal phone, right? That we can communicate to each other. So as technology gets incorporated, jobs do change and you have to adapt to these changes. And it's really interesting, I think, especially in the arts and music circles, because, we're, there's a discussion of exactly this post-truth world, right? Anybody can create, anything on the internet and release it, whether it's, true or not, and every story, like filmmaking, is a fantasy. Every film is a story, right? So I have a lot of friends. I actually caught up with an old friend of mine that produced music videos and went into interactive arts, and now he's too expensive. These young kids that I'm traveling with, like these skater kids, they make their own little skate videos on iPhone and put in these like effects and stuff and produce a TikTok video within the day. You no longer need the media workers anymore either, right? In LA, for example, like the whole film industry is going to be completely changed now in how we incorporate. First it was computer graphics, right? And then you had all these marvels and extreme computer graphic film come in, but the storytelling got to be repetitive and boring, to be frank, right? So I think we're talking about that. I think humans will incorporate AI as a tool, as well as Bitcoin and Nostr, right? These are tools that people use to tell the story. But now some, young girl in Mongolia who has an internet access that wants to tell her cultural story and make music about it has the ability to do that. And then if the TikTok generation likes that and wants to send, sats as they listen to the music, they can listen to it on Fountain FM on an advertised free model. There's no third party producer or record label or, film producer, dictating that this actress shall play this film, right? Anyone, I can even decide if I want to try to, produce a film with AI, I can try to generate that story. So it really, every tool has, every tool has its dual use, and a gun, right? A gun or an airplane, right? Airplane carry passengers, and it also drops bombs, right? So, Bitcoin will be used for illicit use too. Like, you can't control it, right? Governments don't have the ability to control it. So it really depends upon the individual, how you want a relationship with a gun, how you want to have a relationship with the money, how you want a relationship with a psychedelic substance, right? It could be medicine, it could be an addiction. It depends on the relationship. Media is a big one too, right? Censorship. Twitter back in the day censored a active president, right? And so Nostr now is sovereign identity. It's a public ID address, right? And as an act, for example, I came through the activist realm. If they deem me as a drug dealer, even though I'm not selling, right? They can shut down my account, my social media accounts. That's my voice. They can shut down my bank account. That's my economic, savings. So I was just proactive and moving forward to something that can't be shut down. Bitcoin as my savings account that's accessible anywhere around the world, without a bank telling me I can access my own money or not, right? The whole network says that if I have that money and the private key to it, then I can transfer it to, in a pinch, if I want to buy a car in Costa Rica or whatever it is, right? And then media too, like my voice. If I get deplatformed, we went back to Nostr a couple years ago. Nostr stands for Notes and Other Things Transmitted by Relays, and it's essentially a similar decentralized system. People pop up servers and relays that relay information, whether it's, it's a social media that's not run by a central server anymore. So there's nobody that can dictate whether that, you know, to deplatform me because I, put up wrong content, right? Wrong speak, according to the federal government or whatever. So, so that's, I mean, and those two are like really important economic factors and freedom of speech, really, right? Is what we're talking about. So, yeah, I think that over the last 20 years, we had centralized powers, including digital platforms like Meta, Twitter, X, Google. All these software giants are now mature, and then now I think there's a new layer of smaller businesses that can compete with these tools, right? It's social media platforms that can't be censored, money that can't be censored, right? So if psilocybin becomes legal at the state level but illegal at the federal level, which is what cannabis is going through, it becomes, the cannabis industry in Washington state, for example, is a cash economy. So you have to go and get cash, which is an anonymous, paper that you bring to the dispensary. So when we get into the mushroom world, can we just do that on the digital network? So, I mean, a penny is being deplatformed, right? Because the copper in the penny is worth more than a cent now. So I think
It's just been debased so
yeah,
hard that all these coins are melting them down and selling the metal is more valuable than the actual money. It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. So with that in mind, I mean, my point is the sovereignty part, right? We don't want somebody halfway across the world that doesn't know what's going on at the local level to dictate what we can and can't ingest into our body autonomy. It just frankly just goes down to body autonomy. If we have body autonomy, it would solve all of these political debates that's going on between these two parties that are just corrupt anyway, and they no longer reflect for the people. So yeah, it's a reset, reboot, we're starting over, and then trying to rebuild these new institutions, right? Like, I think that all these technologies, and I consider, like, psychedelics to be a technology as well, right? It's, it's primal technology.
It's like
Humans,
nature's technology.
yeah, natural technology. Yep,
Mhm.
yep. So, yeah, just I think that it's scary. I mean, it's disruptive times that's going on, and like a lot of people are, going back to AI, are going to lose their jobs, right? But we're going to all have to adapt to find value. And a lot of the things we're discussing within community is, an AI can't replace a human experience, right? So the awness of going to see a sunset at the beach with your friends on a microdose and being like, it's great to be alive. An AI on my phone, is that going to replace that? No, right? So I think that's the positive message that we need to build. The story that we need to build is that, yeah, it's changed, and that's why psychedelics is important, because psychedelics, at least for me and my personal like relationship with it, really helps me with change, because change is hard and change is scary. And so I think that's why psychedelics is really helpful, in these times where major changes are going on in how we, store our money, for example, right? In Bitcoin. I mean, it's a huge change. I just drive by banks nowadays and I'm like, these are not going to exist in 20 years, right? Are we going to have Bitcoin offices there? I don't know. Who knows? 15 years ago, there were no cannabis dispensaries. There's 5 of them within a mile block now, right? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Nobody knows. That's why it's awesome. That's the one thing that we all have is, even though all these Bitcoiners want to predict the price of Bitcoin, nobody knows because nobody knows the future. We can all look at patterns and big scale fourth turning disruptions, and I think there's some kind of a psychological thing to that, but we still don't know how these technologies going to impact us in our everyday lives. But for now, we just adapt to it. And then I feel like I've already turned and I'm using Bitcoin wherever possible now, right? And then hoping to show the way I teach, because I'm horrible at orange pilling people. So the way that I can show people is just by doing it. I'm like, look, I just bought a van, as Saturday afternoon. I texted one of my kids. I was like, do you want to go and look at a van? And he, like, he found a listing on Meta, and we went to a dealer, and that night I was able to sell 8,000 US dollars of Bitcoin on Fold app, right? And the next morning the dealer used the Visa network, and I drove home with a van. Real easy. I was able to make, this magic internet money and manifest it into a van that I was able to drive off, right? And then have an experience up and down the West Coast in that van. So I'm trying to show that, yeah, this is real money, real savings that can be utilized in real world activities, goods and services now, right? But also explain that that van that was $8,000 was like $50 of investment 10 years ago. Let me buy a $8,000 van in 10 years, right? The money, the way the money grows in the fiat system, you loses purchasing power. Whereas if you save in Bitcoin, it increases in purchasing power. So it completely jujitsu flips like that power, because it's a growing network and more people are going to value Bitcoin for it's just better money. I can do more with it than the US dollar, paper money, or even digital money, right? Especially international. And when you get into, like, I'm an international kid. I grew up on an American Navy base in Japan. So as a kid, this US dollar, even if I'm playing Pac-Man, right? It's a quarter on base and it's 100 yen off base. Same game, but different monetary system. You're paying different things. And that's what's happening at the nation state level, right? And as we travel, my generation now, travel is ubiquitous now. People are traveling all over the world. So I just had a friend come back from Vietnam and then another friend that was in Colombia. And I was back in Japan last year, and I was like, what's dinner for two? If you want to take your girl out for dinner, how much would it cost? And we're comparing the cost of all these countries, right? And the United States dollar, you can't even get it for $100 anymore. Like in Japan, it's maybe $30, $40, right? In Colombia, maybe the same. Vietnam, it's like $10 or $20. So people that are traveling internationally are comparing notes, saying, why is the cost of dinner so different in these different countries? And it's because the money is failing, right? And these nation states were developed as economic zones. Really, it's just a one step up. Nation states are just one step up above a colony, really. So they are set up as economic zones for to control goods and services and people going in and out of borders, right? So that's what the state regulates. And so with the internet, though, it's borderless, and the money now is borderless too. So how's that going to impact um, you know international trade, right, at that level, at the macro level? So I'm not versed enough to really speak the macro economy, but we have amazing economists like Lynn Alden and a couple of these people that are looking at that level and teaching us how those things work, how the fiat money system works. So yeah, I think it's just Bitcoin has been such a good teacher for me too. It was hard at the beginning because your old way of doing things is going to die, right? So you have to face that social, unrest and death for a new system to come on board online. So I think we're right in the middle of that right now, and yeah, I'm really appreciative of all you fantastic podcasters that have reached out, because otherwise I would go insane just thinking about this in
Me
my
too.
head, right? So thank
I think we
you.
would all go insane if we weren't finding some way to really try to push the ball in the right direction that we believe will create a better future. I mean, anyone that isn't doing everything they can to try to create a better future, I feel like is has something wrong going on, because that should be everyone's purpose and everyone's deepest passion is how do we leave the world better than when we got here? And
Yeah.
super thankful to have people like you out there talking about your super interesting ideas and thoughts, and glad there are tons of other podcasts coming out. I keep telling everyone, keep making more podcasts, more podcasts. There's no scarcity mindset here. I say the more the better. We don't care about the competition. We need it. The world needs it. It's far more important that the world gets more information than any specific podcast or getting more market shares. It's a much bigger goals that we're working toward.
Yeah.
You go ahead. Are you going to say something?
Oh no, yeah, no, thank you. And for me, leaving receipts. It's like I told you so. I told you so. So yeah, it's helping though, because these recordings, I can blast them off into my social circles. And me just talking, they don't listen. It just goes over their head. But if they see two people, it's just like that video of the dance. Like with two people are excited about this, then they're like, okay, maybe it's not so crazy after all, right? So, yeah,
Are you
these
talking about
podcasts.
the guy dancing at the gorge and people join him?
Yeah, that
People
one.
people in the real ones know. By the way, that was at our home state
Yeah,
venue that was at the gorge. So that's one of the funniest videos ever. That
but
I
it's
used to dance in the exact spot that guy was dancing in that famous video.
absolutely, and it's how to start a movement on YouTube. If you don't know which video we're talking about, it's called How to Start a Movement. And really, what it is one crazy person yelling out loud is not going to attract a crowd. But if two people are dancing weird and crazy, then it attracts the third person to be curious about what this is about, and then people start joining. So yeah, human psychology is a fascinating place, and I think that's why I like psychedelics too, because it really helps me look at things a little bit differently, a different perspective than what I thought about. And in order to adopt Bitcoin, you really need to deconstruct how the monetary system works and how you get your food and so on to the table. So yeah, I think it's a personal journey that everybody has to go through. But there are super amazing, teachers and educators in both Bitcoin side as well as the psychedelic side. The psychedelic side has really great leaders that are really using social media, and I really want them to get onto the Bitcoin network too, right? Because that's going to strengthen them in terms of the power they have to, like, make a dent in this, to have psychedelics accessible to the plebs, to the everyday people. So yeah, that's the advocacy the Citadel is working for. But we also really want to start, offering. The Northwest is really an amazing place. You're from here. When you come back, reach out. Like, hopefully we'll be starting to do some world gatherings in this amazing Pacific Northwest, where it's beautiful country up here. Yeah, so we want to be able to offer these psychedelics to the people who want to explore their own consciousness and do some healing out here in nature or with music. So right now it's going to be some pop-up events that we'll hopefully be organizing. Um, but yeah, eventually as time goes and the legal structure forums, will be able to have some kind of a permanent retreat that we can offer. But that's the thing. That's the great thing about competition is if Washington State drags on and then if Colorado ends up being the right place, with Bitcoin, we can pop up anywhere in the world. Costa Rica, I still want to go down there. So who knows? And it's open source. The other thing I want to mention is the Citadel project, the Citadel Psilocybin Citadel project is open source. So it's almost like this open source franchise models. If you think this is a great idea, we do have our values at citadel.com, P-S-I-T-A-D-E-L. .com. And yeah, if you object, if you align to those values, it is open source, and just offering safe and responsible use, like don't drag our name in the mud, right? But like it is open source, so if anybody anywhere around the world wants to like offer these kind of spaces, it's available. So yeah, it help. I think Bitcoin decentralization really helps you open up the possibilities of different ways of doing things, and to me that's really hopeful. Like I know we can get caught up in the doom and gloom, doom scrolling of the fiat world crumbling, but those of us that kind of made it to the other side already, made it around the fourth turning, and we're in the spring season, so this is the revitalization of human experiences that we want to offer on Bitcoin now, because AI can take over a lot of these jobs, but the human experience is still something in the domain that we really want to go back to. So we don't want to be a cog in the machine, right? We want to be held and heard and loved, and so I think that is as Terrence McKenna, who is kind of my like guru, and I guess in the psychedelic world, says we're going back to an archaic revival of going back to our roots and making food off the land or providing psychedelic experiences in beautiful natural settings. Those are the kind of experiences that humans have done for millennia, and that's how we push the ball forward. So I think this is our little kick in the can down the road. And yeah, but also I think personally too, like I finished my caregiving journey with my mom last year, so I have a new life, new community right now that I'm putting into, and I'm trying to remember to enjoy life too, just getting back out there in nature, and yeah, just enjoying this existence. It's getting to be spring up here, so it's not that bad now. It's like the cherry blossoms are in full bloom, and now it's almost warm weather. So exciting times this coming year.
And many years to come, as all these things are starting to come together, and we have a lot of things to be hopeful about, like you said.
Uh,
Well, that you pretty much just answered my next question. I was going to bring up the psilocybin citadel. That's kind of your project, so I'm glad you got to cover that here. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss and sort of wrap up before we call it a day on this? I think this has been a super great episode with a lot of good info. Anything else you want to bring in here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ben, for the opportunity, for letting me speak on your show. Yeah, you can reach me. I'm at DECRIMNAT on X. I have some other socials as well. I'm on Nostr. We are rebranding to the Citadel, like I mentioned, which is building on Bitcoin. We're kind of moving away from the advocacy arm, which was at Psilocybin Citadel, and really trying to build stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna if you're if you're interested about the projects, feel free to DM me on any of these platforms, or I'm also at decrimnat@gmail, so you can email me. And also, we're looking for help, especially on the Bitcoin side. So whether you're located in the Pacific Northwest or not, especially on the Bitcoin integration side, we are looking for some help, and we do have a budget. So um, yeah, feel free to reach out. We are looking for some help, especially for like Bitcoin integration for like ticketing and like merchandising sale. I know fellow Bitcoiners have figured it out, but I've been a one woman show for the last 5, 6 years. Now we have some people, at least in the arts and music and festival community, that are coming on board, but I still need some Bitcoin homies to like help me out with some more of the technical side of. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a coder. I can barely build a website. That's my like level of expertise. So yeah,
Same.
if you're looking for some digital work and want to help out with those kind of Bitcoin side integration, I'm happy to talk to you. So please reach out if you can. Thank you.
Very cool. Yes, super exciting stuff. Very glad we could get this message out there. And Lots of exciting times ahead. I'm really looking forward to continuing to follow along your project, and I will make sure to pass it along and keep all those links in the bio so folks can go find out more. DECRIMNAT, really appreciate you coming by. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.